The New York Giants have a top 3 pick in the draft. Will they come away with a quarterback, or will they just go with the 2 vets they have? We'll talk about that and more here today on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Every day. That is right. Locked On NFL is here every day, twice a day, and it is Thursday here on the barbershop. And that means we got Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette to give us his opinions on things that are going on in the NFL. I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of the show, and you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you tap in, whether you watch or listen, and check out Locked On NFL each and every day for your listening pleasure. We always appreciate you today. Our show is sponsored and brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Like the everydayers do. They join us every day, and hopefully you could do the same thing. Here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to end the show. We're going to land this plane about talking about rules that didn't get changed but still might, like the tush push and the automatic first down on defensive holding by defensive backs. We'll talk about Trey Hendrickson. We touched on it a little bit yesterday, but we got another hot clip from Jake and James with the Locked On Bengals. And Trey Hendrickson sounds off, and he's pissed, and he should be, in my opinion. I'm wondering where Joe Burrow is, talking about getting him his money the way he did those wide receivers. But first, we're going to start off talking about the G-Men, the big team in New York, and their quarterback situation. It's not really a quandary. If they want to do something about it, they can. We know they signed 2 veterans. I heard they're going to have real good prayer meetings before the game between Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson. Let's get to it, Chris Carter. What do you think the Giants should do, considering that the lame duck coach and the lame duck GM have to win to save their jobs?
Yeah, I think that's the thing here, right, is that these guys could either try to do the right now thing, or they could try to plan for the future. And the thing is, they don't see themselves having much of a future if they do that. I personally don't think that this is a draft class, unless you get Cam Ward, that you should spend with a super high pick on. I think that there's plenty of talents that you could get in the very early part of the draft where the Giants are. That would be generational players. That would be at other positions. And yeah, sure, you'd be punting on the year because you're not getting your future franchise quarterback. But as I've said on the Locked On Steelers podcast, as I've said everywhere that I've talked about this draft process, I think this is the year of the backup quarterback. Next year could be a year of the starting quarterback. And so if you're the Giants, you could take that. Like, Cam Ward's going first overall. I pretty much reserved that to the Titans. That's just going to happen. But do you want to take the swing on Shedeur Sanders, who I think, has some certain good qualities, but I don't think he's a first-round quarterback. I think he's a second or a third-round quarterback, and that's just where I rank him talent-wise. And so then you have to ask yourself, do you want to spend that high on that kind of a guy and basically say he needs to be the guy, or do you want to get some of these other generational talents, right, that could contribute right now and be part of the building blocks for the future? And just say, hey, you know what? We're rocking out for a year, kind of like how the Steelers are. The Steelers, I don't think they're drafting Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe or anybody like that in the first round. I think that what they're doing is they are building their roster for the 2026 NFL draft. If there's Archie Manning, if there's Nico Amiliava, if there's Lenore Sellers, if there's a number of guys that could be first round picks that project to be better than most people in this class, if not everyone in this class, that they can be ready to move up and make the move there. But if you draft a first round quarterback this year, you are putting yourself in a position where you probably can't do that next year.
You are absolutely right. And I'm going to let Patricia Traynor get hers off here and talk about the Giants quarterback situation. And then we'll come back and talk about maybe the ranking of Shedeur and why people have him ranked so highly and why other people have a little bit of trepidation about him. We'll discuss that as soon as we hear from my girl from Locked On Giants, Patricia Traynor.
At quarterback, obviously, last year quarterback, the play was a big problem. Whether it was Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, Tommy DeVito, Tim Boyle, the Giants just did not get consistent quarterback play. So the Giants double dipping in free agency this year. They added Jameis Winston on a backup salary. They have Russell Wilson coming in on a starter salary. And they, of course, brought back Tommy DeVito, who is going to be kind of like the bridge guy in that he's the one that has the most experience in this offensive system. So he's going to be kind of like the bridge as far as helping everybody else get acclimated to the offensive system that the Giants run. So the Giants, the quarterback situation, is it better than what it was last year? I think we can say that. I think that's safe to say. Is it where it needs to be? No. All right. They still need to address the long term, which again, we'll talk about down the line in in segment 3. But the quarterback situation, I think, all things considered, better than it was last year and the year before, injuries notwithstanding. So that seems to be going in the right direction.
Make sure for the rest of that conversation, you check out Patricia Traynor over on Locked On Giants. Listen, I don't think they're going to take a quarterback. And team building 101 tells me that. What do I mean by that? Teams go into camp maybe with 4 people. Normally, they carry on their 53, they carry 2, and then they have an emergency quarterback at the 3rd spot. No team goes, most teams don't have 3 quarterbacks, and the 3rd guy makes $5 million a year, so you know he's guaranteed that. That tells me they're not going to take a quarterback in this draft. Shedeur Sanders is an interesting case study for me because, and I'm using a phrase like case study in the barbershop, but I'm going to tell you the reason why I think that. And I think that is because coach's son, you know, he doesn't get rattled. There's a calmness about him. And I believe that teams like Baltimore, who are taking a guy late in this 1st round in Lamar Jackson, San Francisco, that got Purdy with the last pick of the draft, have had it golden, man. And that is the ultimate wish that teams have, is to get a guy who can really, really play. And you didn't have to use all of that mental gymnastics and currency of a 1st round pick to get it. But if the Giants were going to take Shedeur and they think that he's that type, they actually would be using that early round pick. And that means he would have to play, especially in the last year, that coach and that GM. And that means that they would be carrying more quarterbacks on their roster than teams normally do, especially with their 53. That's why I don't think he's in play at all for the New York Giants. And I think this is just a whole bunch of smoke.
Yeah, I don't buy into the idea that the Giants should go for quarterback this year. I like you saying, like, you're not paying these guys to not be better. I think everything lines up. This is a year where the Giants are passing at quarterback. I think that they're going to try to handle it with 2 veterans, get through the year. And again, like with that 3rd overall pick, you can do a number of things. You can get, a premier. You might get a shot at Travis Hunter. You might get a shot at, a premier D tackle, Mason Graham, if you think that he's that guy. You get a lot of different chances there. You could get your Will Campbell if you think that he's that guy. There's a number of different things. Or you could trade back. You can see who else is desperate for a player up at that range and start picking up pieces. Because listen, Lord knows that the Giants need to fix a lot of things. So why not maximize your opportunities here? If you're not spending that top 3 pick on a quarterback that is going to be your franchise quarterback, why not leverage it to get the best things so you can build generational you can start to build generational wealth, because that's what you need if you're the Giants, because you don't got nothing. So
right.
So they need to reinvest in a lot of things. And if you're not spending that top 3 pick at quarterback, and you don't think that unless Abdul Carter somehow falls to you, then it's like, okay, you know what? Yeah, that's the guy. Or if you think you can get Travis Hunter there, then I think you're in a spot there. But listen, there's only 2 spots ahead of you, right? So either Cam Ward and one of those guys, or both of those guys, and then you do get Cam Ward. Then it's like, okay, well, it's a different story. So yeah. I think they're going to have their shot at an Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. The question is, do they see that as more valuable, or do they want to trade back and see what kind of a haul they can get for giving up the position to draft one of those guys?
All right, so hear me out here. I think they are better at quarterback than they were last year, even with those 2 guys. I think both of the people that they signed will allow them to win more games than who they had last year. Daniel Jones. That's just my opinion. So they're going to help their cause just by being a little bit better. They were competitive in some games. So let's just say the Giants can get the quarterback alone gets them to 6 or 7 wins. Here's the pick. You either get back a lot of the star power and box office and playmaking. You get that back with Travis Hunter, pairing him on offense, elite neighbors, and then putting him on defense where you got a pretty decent front. And now you got a guy who has this quote unquote box office flair on both sides of the ball. And when he touches the ball, magnetic things happen. That's what you missed with ODB leaving when he was hurt. And that's what you missed with Saquon Barkley. Hear me out with this. Either stay at 3 or move back. If it's not Travis Hunter, I think they ought to take Ashton Genty. You know why? Because he's a bell cow. If those quarterbacks can get you to 6 or 7, and Genty's as good as people think, whether you take him at 3 or move back to 6, I'm telling you, these dudes are trying to survive another year. You add star power, you add a guy who's young, who's cheaper to kind of replace Saquon a little bit in a certain way, but then you also help Malik Neighbors, you help those quarterbacks. Now you take those 6 or 7 games, and now you're at 8. You might be able to convince the brass to keep you another year, Chris.
Yeah, I can see something along those lines. I think that's if you can, you got to show that you're building towards something. You know, I compare it to, you know, I'm a locked on Steelers guy. I know Steelers history. I compare it to Bill Cowher when he had missed his 3rd straight playoff in 2000. The Rooneys signed him to an extension, and people thought they were crazy because Bill Cowher looked like he was going nowhere. But what he saw in that 3rd year was they rose up to be 9-7 at the end of the year, and he was like, "Hey, this locker room still believes in the coach, and that's why we're going to stick with him." And that's why Mike Tomlin still has the job. You know, even though he's never had a losing season, he's made 4 of the last 5 playoffs, so he's never been in the Bill Cowher shoes. But he's been in the position. Mike Tomlin's never lost the locker room, and if Dable in this company can show that, hey, these players still believe in what they're doing here, they see the future, they see the potential that's there, they believe in what they're doing, then yeah, I get investing in that. Because blowing things up. Listen, the Giants are the prime example of blowing things up to blow things up. You blew up Tom Coughlin, and then you've just been on this ship for a decade now.
Got rid of Jerry Reese, you know? Yeah.
Just over and over and over and over and over again. And you want to get off that train. And that's why what you were hoping to do with Brian Dable. So you got to give him space, but he also has to give you reason to give him that space. And so far, it hasn't been that. You know, this front office, again, they signed Daniel Jones to a massive contract, and they let the best running back in football walk. So, and he went and joined their rivals and made them Super Bowl champions. So there you go. So I think that it would behoove the Giants to keep building towards the future. And if they feel like there's a good job done at putting those building blocks in place this season for that future, keep rocking with this crew. But if they don't, then you know what? We just got to tear it down. We got to start again next year. 2
things to remember. The draft doesn't end on that Thursday. There's other picks. Okay. The other thing is you mentioned 3 or 4 quarterbacks. People might say, well, if they win too much, they won't get one of those guys. You know what? Add the Nussmeier kid in from LSU and Drew Aller, right, from up in your parts, up in Penn State. You didn't mention them. So you're going to get guys, in the middle of the draft. 15, 16 next year, there will be quarterbacks taken, unlike this year. All right, let's talk about the Bengals, a team that is pretty much stocked at the top when you talk about skill positions, but the infrastructure it stinks. So we'll get to that in just a second here on Locked On NFL. All right, today's show is sponsored and brought to you by our friends over at GameTime. Man, when you are the person that needs tickets to something, there ain't but one place you need to be, and that's over at GameTime. GameTime is the absolute truth, man, because they have a ticket curating process that helps you get tickets to just about any event in the world. When your favorite basketball team is playing in a big tournament, especially around here in these parts of North Florida, people may be scrambling for tickets. There's no need to scramble. Put all of that guesswork into the hands of GameTime. You'll find better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater, anything with the GameTime Picks curation process. Make sure you tap in. By doing this, download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price. It's guaranteed. All right, moving along with my man Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers here on a Thursday talking about the NFL. And I love when I have the opportunity to park our business and our RV right in the AFC North, because there's nobody that knows the AFC North as a division like Chris, in my opinion. The Bengals. I had a nice discussion yesterday on the show with David Harrison about Cincinnati. And it goes from somebody online telling me that the reason why the Bengals haven't won is because they spent all their money on a quarterback and 2 receivers. I had to let that person know that the Bengals have yet to play a game after they spent all that money on 2 of those 3 players. What got them here was they hit it. They hit it with Joe Burrow and they hit it with T. Higgins on rookie deals. And the very next year, they got Jamar Chase on rookie deal and they went to the Super Bowl. Then they blew it. They blew it because now once they started picking higher and it wasn't obvious, they haven't been able to get the guys that should have allowed them the freedom to do what they're looking to do now, which is let a 31-year-old edge rusher go. Well, that 31-year-old edge rusher is ticked off. And I want you to hear Jake and James from Locked On Bengals talk about Trey Hendrickson. And I'll let Chris Carter come back and tell you what's wrong with the Bengals.
The Cincinnati Bengals are not offering Trey Hendrickson what he wants. He made that very clear on Wednesday. James, there is a lot to get to here with these Trey Hendrickson comments, and we both got repeating themes in terms of communication. We've got analogies from Trey Hendrickson on the Pat McAfee show. We got some details, I think, from Trey Hendrickson that we haven't heard him previously allude to in terms of some of the things that he wants, and perhaps a suggestion in him saying what he wants in terms of things that he's been offered that maybe he doesn't want. Where do you think this starts?
Where does it start? I'll tell you where it's headed. Let's start with where it's headed. And it's a 3-letter word. And it's not win. It's war. It's going to be a war now. That's what it is. Trey Hendrickson going on a national show like the Pat McAfee show, which, by the way, Trey, just come on Locked On Bengals anytime, my man. It's to go there in like 16 hours after that quote, maybe 18 hours. But Trey's pissed. And use that word, and I don't use that word a lot on it. He's clearly angry.
I'm just wondering why Joe Burrow ain't come out and said nothing. If he did, I missed it. But Joe Burrow was telling everybody that those receivers need to get paid, and Jamar Chase was saying they need to get paid. They need some defense too now. I wonder if anybody's going to stick up for Trey in this situation.
I mean, look, I think the trio wants to stick together because they work well together. They get their numbers together, right? Like they can clearly light it up. But here's my thing: is if you're the Bengals, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tony, have they made the playoffs the last 2 years?
No.
Have they made any progress? Have they gotten any closer to the Super Bowl since they were in the Super Bowl?
No.
All they've done is regress and fall backwards. And yes, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, all great talents and top tier guys. But here's the thing: you had those guys on rookie deals. That was your time to go and be aggressive. Then to say, hey, let's stack this up right now. Let's get everybody we can to score while we got the hot thing. We got the hot thing, and we're not paying for it. But now all those guys, they're getting their veteran contracts, and they're taking up a huge chunk of your salary cap space. And so now you're going to have to build the rest of the team through your draft picks. And like you said, they haven't exactly been nailing their draft picks when they're not picking in the top 5 every year. And so now you're running into the space where you may have those 3 guys, but can you pay Trey Hendrickson? Apparently not, because he's going on national TV and talking about you and not liking how, because remember, Trey Hendrickson went on national TV because the Bengals went on national TV and was like, well, he may not get what he likes, but what he wants, but what we're giving him is fair. And he was like, well, that's no way to talk to me on, over national TV instead of talking to me in person and just having it out with my agent. You want to put us on Front Street? Fine, I'll put us on Front Street too. And so now you look like a whole mess there. But people said this back when they drafted Jamar Chase in the first place when they already had T. Higgins. They needed to build the offensive line. They still can't protect Joe Burrow. He still gets hit all the time. He still gets hurt all the time. He's been missing. I think since he's been drafted, he's had as many career season injuries as they've had playoff appearances. I may be missing one there. I may be missing one playoff, but they have not fixed everything in Cincinnati. And keeping these 3 guys, great, awesome, but you got to do something to show that you're building on top of them. And I haven't seen that on defense or in the O-line. And they're going to be pass happy. They're going to be fun. They're going to be wild. They're going to have all these numbers and everything. But I still see them as the third or fourth best team in the AFC North because they're still going to not be able to play defense. They're still going to get bulldozed. Joe Burrow's going to be under siege, and that's going to balance out in the opposite direction when of their talent at wide receiver and quarterback. So to me, all they did was they signed on the players that they had on cheap contracts for long term without adding the things that made them a bad team for those years. So my opinion, this is Trey Hendrickson is pissed off. He has every right to be pissed off because he's done everything he's supposed to be. He's supposed to be a franchise edge rusher for these guys. He's going to really help out this defense. If he ends up going, man, the Bengals better start scoring on some of these later first-round draft picks, or I guess middle first-round draft picks because they're in the middle part of the first round. But they got to start scoring on those and scoring big, not just getting the occasional starter. They got to start finding those generational talents in the middle part of the draft. And listen, when they've still had high picks. I think Jonah Williams, the offensive tackle they took a few years back, he was a top 10 pick. He was the 10th overall pick or something like that, and he wasn't a top 10 pick as far as an offensive tackle.
See, they've tried, but see, this is where what you don't do well gets exposed. And now it's the only thing you can do to save yourself. I remember in the movie, Robin Harris said, Larry Bird, all he does is pass and shoot 3-pointers. And Robin Harris said, hell, that's all he needs to do, right? But now you're asking Larry Bird to win the dunk contest. He can't do it. It's the one thing he can't do. The Bengals have to do the one thing that they cannot do and the thing that they haven't been able to do, and that is evaluate talent when it's not obvious. Yeah, I don't blame them for signing those 3 dudes and giving them all the money because that's the only thing they've done right that has worked for them. But they got Amarius Mims. They got Baby Zeus and Orlando Brown. They have tried. They are awful in the front office and in their scouting department, and that has been that way for 50 years. It ain't going to change overnight, but now it's going to be put on Front Street. You can blame Lou Anarumo all you want to, but the thing is this. You had guys on a rookie deal, and all you had to do was build streets and build bridges and get infrastructure, and you did not do it, and now the town is flooded, and all you got to build for it is paying guys more money now than you ever had to pay them before to do what they already been doing, and that is putting up big-time numbers. We're going to talk rules changes here in just a second on Locked On Jaguars, and I'm going to tell you something. I ain't heard so much pushing and tushing since I was in high school, and Salt and Pepper made the song Push It. We're going to talk about the tush push and all of that stuff in just a second here on Locked On NFL. Chris Carter, how do you feel about the tush push?
I feel like it shouldn't be totally banned. And I've said this in several places. I think it should be modified. I think that if you're good at it, you should be able to be good at it. However, the inherent thing about the tush push that makes it impossible to defend if you just do a few simple things right, and I know that I don't mean to make that seem menial because some teams can't do these things right. But if you do it right, it's impossible to time up, right? Like if you just go on any count, you get to the line with 20 seconds left, teams can't wedge themselves. They can't jump your snap count because you're forcing them into guessing game. That's what the Commanders went through in the NFC Championship game when they just kept jumping off sides because they were trying to guess the right count, but they know if they don't guess the right count, they get bulldozed. If they don't try to guess the right count, they get bulldozed. And so I think, as I've said several times, I think that what should be done is something that makes things that makes things more even and give the defense an advantage, because we've made so many offensive rules for the offense over the years. Give the defense something to balance, Wig. And what I say to do this is don't ban it, but say, hey, team offense, you want to do the tush push? Okay, we're stopping the clock. It's a 10-second runoff so that you can't use it as a free timeout, and you will do the tush push, but you will declare that you're doing the tush push, and we will tell you when it'll be a countdown, 3, 2, 1, go. So there's no more hut. There's no fakes to try to get them to jump off sides, because you have to jump off sides. You have to try to jump off sides to get lucky to stop this, to stop that. If you just wedge everyone together to get that 1 yard in that situation. So if you want to do the tush push, do it. But now defenses know when you're doing it and how you're doing it. And then it does become an even battleground of who's just bigger and meaner and stronger, and not a guessing game that it is. So yeah, my opinion, modify it that way. Don't ban it.
All right. I like that. I'm going to listen to Ross Jackson here from our NFL Squad show. Give a similar answer, and then I'll come back and put my spill on it.
NFL annual meeting, always a hot topic. Every year the committee gets together and they say, you know what? What is going on in the NFL? What can we change? What can we tweak in the game? And the biggest talking point coming out of this week, the tush push, which I'm very curious for all of your thoughts, because that was a subject that got tabled. There was one thing that they were looking to ban the tush push, which I personally think they shouldn't touch it. Ross Jackson, let's hear from you. Where do you go with this?
Leave it in the game. If you can't stop it, that's not their fault. It's not their fault. Like, are we going to do this for everything that we can't stop? Oh, I'm so mad Patrick Mahomes keeps throwing passes because while he's laid out horizontally, are we going to ban horizontal throws? Like, what are we doing? Stop it. If you got a problem with it, figure out a way to defend it. If you can't figure out a way to defend it, show me the injury data that says that it's a risk, everything like that. And then if you can't show me the injury data, then what are we doing here?
Here's why I agree with you and I agree with Ross. It ain't like you can't do it back. If you can do it back, if you're as big and as strong as Philly, and if your quarterback squats 650 pounds, this reminds me of the Lakers back in the day when Kobe was a closer. Late in the game, you can't stop him unless you foul him. And if you foul him, he's going to make 90% of his free throws. So it's like somebody saying the Lakers can't give the ball to Kobe Bryant late in the game.
Well, it's not
Do it back. Do it back.
But see, here's where I push back on that, because you know what, Tony? It used to be allowed that cornerbacks could beat up on receivers all the way down the field. You can't hold them, but you can make contact. You can put your hands on them, and until the ball's in the air, you can fight with them. And then eventually they said, the Steelers cornerbacks are destroying people. No one can get past Mel Blount. We got to stop this. This isn't fair. We have to change the rules. And so they changed the rules because they said, okay, we want to stop that because we feel like that's unfair. So where is this line of, oh, just do it back. If you can't do it, just do it back. Why didn't we make the Steelers do it back? Why did Hines Ward have to change up how he blocked, for everything? There's all these lines that I look at and I say here, and here. The defense has had to give up so much over the years. You can't touch a receiver here. You got to touch the quarterback here, but not here, but not here. Like you got to do this, that, and the third. So we make all these provisions for one side of the ball, but can't make it for the other side of the ball. And that's where I push back and I say, look, I hear you on the can't stop it rule, but y'all don't ever say that when it's time to make it easier for your favorite fantasy player to get more fantasy points. And that's where I think that the problem comes in today's NFL is we have become too offensive centric in how the rules are shaped. And this is an instance where you can say, you know what? We're going to put the defense on even playing field. This isn't stopping the tush push. Again, my proposal is not to ban it. It's not stopping the tush push, but it's saying, now the defense knows when you're doing it, and this is now head-to-head. Now it does see who is actually the better unit right now. Who can win that leverage when they know when you're going, you know where you're going, and it's just mano-a-mano.
I'm tracking with you, and the reason why I'm tracking with you is because, well, when an extra offensive lineman comes in, he has to declare as an eligible receiver. I get it. Ain't no problem with that. But the reason why I was really cheering was because you just touched on something else that we got to talk about. Listen to this. Squad show.
I'm not opposed to it, but I am a little bummed out. And I want your guys' thoughts on this. I am bummed out as a defensive guy that the Detroit Lions had one proposal not get passed where they were proposing that, a illegal contact or defensive holding is not an automatic first down necessarily. Yeah. I wish that would have been passed a little bit, but I'm curious because I think a lot of people are split on it. People are saying, well, now DBs are going to intentionally hold. No, they're not. Like, that's the thing. Like, people have this assumption that if you make it feasible, DBs are just going to use that to get out of something. No, I mean, how many times have we seen guys reroute in zone coverage and get flagged for a ridiculous penalty, and it ends up changing the tide of the game? That's one thing I wish they would have cleaned up.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I don't think that you're going to get that from DBs because pass interference is still a spot foul. Like, that's not going to change, you know what I mean? And so keep that, but the idea of like illegal contacts of there being an automatic first down, like, that's a little steep to me.
I don't like changing rules just because to change them just for change's purpose. Because then, like you said, you're going to be hopping and skipping around, and at some point, somebody's going to get an injustice done to them. I think you modify it. And you know what? Most of the time, if everybody knows the Eagles going to do the tush push, so the declaration part, they know, everybody knows what's coming. But here's the part where I'm with you. You got to put it on a ticker. You can't allow them also to have the and you got a Luvu jumping over the top trying to do a Troy Polamalu. It's just at some point the NFL has to do what's good for the game. And then some people may argue this: keep them out of 3rd and 1, keep them out of 4th and inches, because if you don't, the Eagles have this advantage. If it's 3rd and 3, I don't care if we get 1.5 yards, because you know what? We're going to get another 1.5 yards on the last play. That's the advantage that they have. A lot of that too is the way that they build their team. Don't get mad because everybody gave up on Mekhi Becton and they brought him in at 370 to go with 340 for Landon Dickerson and 330 for Lane Johnson and 360 for the left side. You could have picked him too. I just can't stand when people they have the right to do something and they don't do it, and all they do is complain about people that do things really, really well.
And again, like I'm not saying that they don't do it really well. And I'm not going against that. My whole thing is put it on even footing. Because then all of a sudden the Chris Joneses of the world can be like, all right, you can't. Yeah, I know when you're coming. And now this is a straight up battle here. But instead, it's that quick thing where you could do that quick hide at any point in time and because there's not an actual play being developed. Again, this isn't football as it's done. Football is moving parts. Football is guys moving laterally to create leverage a certain point. This is just straight up rugby. That's what it is. I think it would be different if this was a play, if this was a full-on play. Like when Kobe's making shots because Kobe's moving around. There's off-ball movement to create shots, or he's crossing somebody up. You have that's when you have it. But this isn't that's basketball. Just like when you run a pitch, that's football. You're gonna have a guard pull. That's gonna give the opportunity for the linebacker to read the guard, to move out into space to say, hey, I'm gonna cut that off. Hey, defensive end, the guard's coming. You got to stop them from getting out there to free things up. Or if you're the defensive tackle and my guard's pulling, I got to follow him. I got to shoot that gap so I can get back there. That's where the strategy becomes involved. That's when it's chess. That's when it's football. That's when it's fun, the X's and O's. But when you take the X's and O's out of it and then you only give an advantage to one side of the ball, that's where I'm like, I don't have as much fun as the viewer watching that. I'm just like, you know what? I get it. It's in the rules.
I got you. And, I don't like the selectivism. I'm with you about the selectivism of when you decide to change rules when things are going good. You ain't seen nobody changing the kickoff rules when Devin Hester was in the league, did you?
Mm-hmm.
No. Or Josh Cribbs? No. They just waited until now. Okay, we're going to change the kickoff rules. And now, to Philly's credit, I would hate to have had Devin Hester and they changed the kickoff rules. That's the point. Oh, you're going to do it now, just like you're saying with Pittsburgh, with Mel Blount, who looked like he was 6'8", 300 pounds, looked like Shaq playing cornerback in the day, especially when you're relatively speaking about the size of the players. I ain't mad at Chris Carter for saying, nah, you need to modify it the same way you modified the way Hines Ward blocks or the way Mel Blount covers. I ain't mad at you, Chris. As a matter of fact, I'm going to think about it some more. I might even talk about it tomorrow on Locked On NFL. And if you want to hear it, all you got to do is come over there. If you want to hear more about the draft too, and Shedeur Sanders prospects, check out Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parsons and Coach Keith Sanders. Man, they break it down on Locked On NFL Draft like nobody else. They'll even talk about late round prospects. Make sure you check that out every time you get a chance here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Chris Carter, go get to it, man. I know you got about 30 jobs and you do them all well. I'm going to let you get out of here and go get to it. Check him out on Locked On Steelers and me on Locked On Jaguars. Till next time, Tony Wiggins here on Locked On NFL.